Welcome to the RSTNE Roundtable podcast, a discussion that focuses in the gold standard of the Word of Yahuwah. Here are your three hosts, Sholiach Moshe, leader Yoshiyahu, and leader Mordecai.
Shalom, shalom, friends. We're back with another new week, episode number 4. It's good to have you with us this week. And please tell your friends and family about the RSTNE Roundtable, available on all major platforms, YouTube, Apple, Amazon Prime. So it's so good to have you. I'm here with our panel and our friends. Elder Mordecai, leader Yoshi, and yours truly. I'm a doctor, or at least what they tell me. But anyway, we won't talk about that. We ended last week, and we promised our brother Ramos that he'd be able to share something and ask some questions or make some comments. So we're going to keep our word that we said last week. So, Brother Mordecai, we're all ears. Welcome, everybody.
Shalom. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my question last week was, well, I know this is for a lot of folks that are believers, this information about the restoration of scriptures. And I know they ask themselves about how many books exactly are Hebrew, Aramaic. I don't know if it's too much of a question. And how many books are Greek, because they are like the debate I had that time with that gentleman. He believes that the whole Brit Hadashah comes from the Greek, from the original Greek. And so I want to know how many. Yeah, I want to know how many are originally Aramaic, originally Greek from the Septuagint, or Hellenized Greek.
That's a very good question, and matter of fact, just a week or two ago, I asked Yoshi to make a pizza pie. You ever see those pie charts that show you the percentage of how much? And that helps a lot too. I don't know, Yoshi, if you can, you can't screen share, I don't think, right?
Right.
I can show you that the best way to answer that question regarding the RSTNE, how much is from the Greek, how much is from this. I think we have the answer right here. I guess this is one of the reasons
I remember this now.
Yeah.
I remember.
That's one of the reasons we made this, which will help to clarify that. And then I can add on to that here. Okay. So you see it there on your screen.
Right.
This gives you the idea of the percentage of the RSTNE. It's 29% from the Masoretic, 29% from the Septuagint, that's the Tanakh, 20% from the Dead Sea Scrolls. These are rough numbers, roughly. 8% from the Peshitta, although it could be a little higher. The recently found Hebrew Gospels and manuscripts, 3%, 4%. Samronite Torah, Shomronite, 3%. The Aramaic Targumim, 2%, and the Shem Tov, 2%. That's basically how we. But having said that, the RSTNE is unique, and I'm glad you asked that, in that we combine. Sometimes we're trying to get. Remember, we're trying to get the intention of the Father, right? We're trying to get the intention of Yahuwah, and so sometimes I have half a verse, let's say, from the Greek and half a verse from the Aramaic, or sometimes I'll have half a verse from the Aramaic, and then part from the Greek, and part. So literally in one verse, you could find 3 sources. I think that gives you the roundest, fullest picture. So this way, nobody can pin you down in the RSTNE, Restoration Scriptures, True Name Edition, and say, well, I don't like it because it's Aramaic. It's not. Well, I don't like it because I don't believe the Greek. Okay. Well, I don't like it because I don't speak Hebrew. Okay. Well, we present In some verses, different parts, it's the same verse and it's the same concept, but it gives you a fuller picture.
So the Masoretic text is not all bad. It's just
No,
it's a lot of changes there that the Masoretic Jews did, but it's not really all bad. Some of the scriptures are accurate and it lines up with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
correct. The thing is, if you throw out the Masoretic because of the anti-Yahuwah and anti-Yahusha redactions, so what do we have left? That's the oldest Hebrew manuscript. So if I'm going to start a translation tomorrow, and I'm going to call it the Baker County translation, where do I start? The Catholics are not going to give me a Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew that the Septuagint was based on is missing. We don't know where that document is. We can't use the Samaritan Torah because that's limited to 5 books. It's only 5 books. So we're stuck. Yes, we can't. People think, oh, I don't want to get the RSTNE because it's not Masoretic based. First of all, it's because it's Masoretic based. First of all, it's the least Masoretic based. Only 29%, number one. Number two, if we get rid of the Masoretic, okay, we don't have a Latin original of the Tanakh. We don't have a Greek original. Why? Because it was given in Hebrew. So we either live with the Masoretic or we adopt another religion. We adopt the Quran. Even
So
that. And by the way, that's one of the things that a Muslim will say. All y'all have all these language problems. We don't. All of the versions were written in Arabic. We don't have to deal with Chinese. We don't have to deal with Greek. That's one thing they say. See, you guys have all these problems with translations. We don't have that. So you see, I just so you know how the enemy works. But the point is, getting back to your statement is 100% accurate because without the Masoretic, where do we start? Where do we start? But that's the point. The English Bibles did not rely on the Masoretic. They could have realized that Kurios was originally Yahuwah, but they didn't want to focus on that. They wanted to focus on what Jerome did and what Luther did, hoping that their Hebrew was good, right? They hoped that it was good. That's the problem. The problem is not the Masoretic. If you throw out the Masoretic, you're in deep doo-doo. You got some deep doo-doo because now you have no Hebrew. Now you have absolutely nothing to check.
So what you do as a Hebrew scholar in the restoration of scriptures is, for example, you have the Dead Sea Scroll as a root. Then if you have a certain verse, you go to the Masoretic, the Samaritan, and the Greek and the Septuagint as they're witness to each other. Then you use that.
Correct. And
Uh,
even if they don't match, they give you a fuller picture.
the same context,
Yeah,
right?
correct. We're digging out to true. It's like what Yahusha said. I have not come to destroy the Torah, but to teach it. Well, how are you? How is your teaching going to be different? Here's how. Not the Greek, not the Hebrew, or I'm going to teach you Torah in Chinese. No, that's not why it's different. It's different because I am come to what? To reveal as Yahuwah the original what? Intention. So by putting 3, 4 different translations, reliable, mostly reliable, into one single verse, what are we doing? We're not, you can't put us in a box. Like we don't have a Latin agenda. We don't have a church agenda, right? We don't have an Orthodox Jewish agenda. You can't put us in a box. We're giving you the full picture. You make up your own mind. We're taking the best available resources, putting them into a package, and now you discern what you understand and what you don't understand. It's a unique approach to translations. In other words, I don't have when I come to verse 3, what a translator is going to do is they're going to choose. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls is different than the Masoretic, but in this case, the Masoretic makes more sense, believe it or not. So, am I bound by Masoretic tradition or am I bound by the Dead Sea Scroll tradition? The answer is neither. I put both. What's your name? Is it Mordechai or is it Ramos? Do I have to
My
choose?
wife,
Do I have to choose between Mordechai and Ramos, or can I say both parts of your name?
Mhm.
That's what I do. And that's what makes the RSTNE unique. One of the things that makes it unique.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that or comments before we get to some tension stuff? No.
I have a comment on what you guys were saying is that basically I'm learning this slowly as I progress in the obvious scriptures as well, that the Masoretic text cannot be put there unchecked because it has been doctored several times in several places, and the addition of little details is also prevalent. So you need to check everything, but in no way, shape, or form it is dismissible because we wouldn't have Tanakh without the Masoretic. It's an impossibility. And also, what I like most about the RSTNE in this little walk of mine so far is that it's not, there is no agenda in the sense of, okay, we are trying to make it an Aramaic primacy Bible, or no, we are just trying to get to the best. And regardless of what this best can be, it may be the Greek sometimes, it may be the Aramaic sometimes, and sometimes it may be the Masoretic. The thing is to get the best. It's not about promoting a podium of languages. It's not about that. This
That's
is
the
what I
key
like
right
most.
there, to get the best reliable sources. And if the best is two sources, we put two. If the best reliable sources amount to three, we use three. There are cases where the best reliable source is the Masoretic, so we don't change it. Now, here's the thing with the Greek, okay? Exactly the opposite of what those guys did that we learned in the last episode, okay? When we talk about de-Greeking our Bibles. I heard a guy the other day get on. He's very knowledgeable. I respect him as a scholar. He knows his stuff. He spends hours and hours, and I have great respect for him. I don't know if he respects me, but I respect him. Um, his approach is that everything has to be completely washed and de-Greeked, right? You understand what that means? Removal of any Greek whatsoever. Here's the problem with that. It's like the problem with removing the Masoretic. If you remove the Greek, which is the Septuagint in the Tanakh, that's more reliable, okay, in many parts than the Hebrew Masoretic. What that man and true scholar should be saying, in my view, is that we are to remove the Greek as much as possible from our translations in the New Testament, while we hold on to the Greek in the Old Testament, because that Septuagint, in many cases, especially when it comes to Messiah, is more reliable. So we got to be careful when you hear about somebody, oh, we got to get rid of the Greek. We got to get rid of the Greek. But the next question is, what part? What part of the Greek do you want to get rid of?
Mm. Well, even Andrew Gabriel Roth, which has the Aramaic New Testament, and I don't know how accurate it is. I don't know. I like it, but even he said that some Greek, a lot of Greek manuscripts are on point, and he uses it. So you can't get rid of the Greek.
Exactly. See
Why
that?
did? Yeah.
That's exactly right. This guy that I was listening to, that's exactly what I was thinking. Look, here's what a lot of people don't know, which is why you're tuning into the RSTNE Roundtable podcast, which I expect to grow. I expect we're going to start out small and have thousands and thousands of listeners as this podcast gets shared. Because, you listen to dudes who know what they're talking about, which is a nice change nowadays, to be honest with you. But exactly what you said. Let's just see. You notice what the Restoration Scriptures True Name Edition does. As Yoshi was saying, as you were saying, it stays away from radicalism. We only have Greek, radical. We only have Aramaic, radical. We only have Hebrew, radical. Because when you go with those radical positions, you don't have scriptures. What are you going to do with Daniel? Okay. What are you going to do with Daniel, which was written in Chaldean or Syriac? Syriac is basically Aramaic. Okay. So if you have the position, I only go with the Hebrew scriptures. If it's Greek, I don't. It's not legitimate. If it's Aramaic, it's not legitimate. What are you going to do with the Book of Daniel? You got 4 chapters in there that are Aramaic in the Hebrew Bible. In the Stones edition, Jewish JTS Bible, you have chapters in Syriac or Aramaic. Same thing. What are you going to do with that? If you go all Hebrew, so you're going to lose the book of Daniel. Then watch this. If you go Aramaic primacy, the primacy, only Aramaic. Let's de-Greek, right? I made up a word, right? Like de-Greece, to remove Greece. You de-Greek the New Testament, you got a bigger problem. What's that problem? And Andrew Roth will tell you. There are 5 books in the Peshitta that are missing. So any Aramaic that you have of First John, First Peter, Jude, and Revelation comes from a Greek. Murdoch took the Greek, I don't know which one, he had 5,800 manuscripts to choose from, and translated it into the Aramaic. They pasted that 5 missing books, and today we call it the Peshitta. But if you go to the East, to the churches of the East, they don't have those books. They don't have those 5 missing books. So if you're going to be a radical in any language, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, now what do? If I have the approach like some of the translators, I'm only going to use Aramaic in the New Testament because all the Greek is a lie. Because I'm going to de-Greek my Bible. Koniuchowsky's Bible is wrong. Every Bible that uses Greek pagan language is wrong. Okay, so now you have to remove 5 books from your scriptures because you're saying you're using the original Aramaic, but the original Aramaic didn't have 5 books. What are you going to do? You're a translator. What are you going to do?
Well, also that you saying that, it reminds me of a scripture that says that our forefathers were Assyrian or an Aramaic ready to perish. So they were not Greek, they were not Jewish, they were not, I don't know, whatever people are saying today, but it says my forefathers. This is what you should say. My forefather was an Aramean or Assyrian, ready to perish.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Also, what can you do? Okay, let's go only Hebrew. All right, take Psalm 40 verse 6. What you find in the Masoretic? You're not going to find the right thing. While in the Septuagint, it gives the messianic prophecy. So there is no extremism here because Yahuwah didn't choose like a little block of the planet and everybody else is doomed. No, he spread his word to the world for everybody to have a chance to be saved. So he is not extremist in the sense that no, if you don't have this type of skin tone, you're not in. No, it's not that. He gave a chance for everybody. So if you are an extremist, let's say we didn't have the internet, let's say in Ezra's time, okay, let's translate the scriptures in Hebrew. You guys from the north, you're not welcome. That's extremism. Yahuwah doesn't do that. So the language problem is a language problem because we have a lot of them. But without it, we wouldn't be able to reach many people as we have nowadays. So following along what you said, like it's impossible to have extremism in a sense or in the other.
That is so true because of what's happened over the years. If you go with the Hebrew and you kick out the Greek, you miss the Septuagint, which matches the New Testament better. If you go with the Greek, then you don't keep Shabbat, you don't keep Torah, and you wind up in extreme Greco-Roman paganism. If you go with the Aramaic, you're fine for the Brit Hadashah, but there are 5 missing books. So that means you don't have the revelation of the end times. You don't have the Apostle Peter's instructions on how to live Kadosh. So you can't say only Aramaic, only Greek. The RST refuses that, and that's what makes the RST unique. The scriptures from South Africa, they go by the Greek. They're basically King James. Most of these Hebraic versions, okay, are King James, Tyndale, Wycliffe, Cloverdale. They take out God and they put in Yahuwah, and they call it a Hebrew Bible. That ain't no Hebrew Bible. Hebrew Bible is what we're doing. We offer you the best scholarship from every translation, and we put it together in a picture so you have a full picture because we are after the intention of Abba Yahuwah. But do me a favor, that's very important that you were saying. Psalm 40 is a perfect example. If we say we're only going to use the Hebrew in the Tanakh, and reject the Septuagint because it's a Greco-pagan Roman gods, etc., watch what we wind up with. Can you read the Masoretic text in Psalm 40, 6 and 7? And you'll see the difference between the Masoretic um, and the Septuagint. There's a huge difference. And this is in many places where the Masoretic has been redacted. But if we get rid of the Masoretic, we're getting rid of the oldest Hebrew text we have, other than the Dead Sea Scrolls. But remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls is not a complete Tanakh. The Dead Sea Scrolls are fragments.
Yep.
We can get rid of the Masoretic if we find the Dead Sea Scrolls from Genesis to Second Divrei Hayamim. If we find all the books of the Tanakh in Qumran, we can now get rid of the Masoretic. But that hasn't happened.
Yep. I got it.
People talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, they don't know what they're talking about. First of all, the only things we have are fragments. Second of all, there are other Dead Sea Scrolls that are in the Vatican, or the Israeli government doesn't want to release them to the public because people will see that Yahusha is the Messiah and that he's not a Christian God who came to start a new religion, but he is the fulfillment of the Masoretic text and the Septuagint that people are reading. So they've got this thing under lock and key, the Israeli Antiquities Authority. So all we have are fragments, okay? But that's what makes the Isaiah scroll so special. The Isaiah scroll in the Museum of the Book in Jerusalem, right opposite the Knesset, that houses all 66 chapters of Isaiah intact. And it matches perfectly the Masoretic. So if you throw out the Masoretic, you're also throwing out the Isaiah scroll from the Dead Sea.
Yep.
Well, the good thing about the restoration, I'm sorry.
I got the things to read here if you want me to do the comparison.
Either one.
All right, I got it here. So from the Masoretic,
Mordecai, hold on to your thought.
Psalm 40 verses 6 and 7 from the Masoretic-based text. So sacrifice and offer you did not desire, but my ears you have opened, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I have come. It is written about me in the scroll. Okay, all nice and good. This is the Masoretic. But now let's go with the Septuagint of the same thing. Psalm 40 verses 6 and 7. A sacrifice and offering you wanted not, but a body you prepared to me. Whole burnt offerings and a sacrifice for sin you did not seek. Then I said, behold, I come. In the chapter of the scroll, it is written concerning me. So in the Masoretic, there's no body and there is no coming of this person with the body prepared. So neglecting the Septuagint basically makes us miss a messianic prophecy that was fulfilled by Messiah Yahusha. I wonder why was that? Because the Masoretics, the Pharisees, they didn't want anything to do with Yahusha. They didn't want to accept him as Messiah.
We caught him red-handed. We caught them.
Giving Yahusha the control of the messiahship would say, okay, let's forget about Rome because we need to follow this dude now, and practically we're going to be killed by the Roman Empire.
Now go to Hebrews 10 and tell me, does Hebrews 10 match the Masoretic or the Septuagint?
Yep.
Go to Hebrews 10, 3 and 4.
Okay. You want me to go in what version specifically?
Pick a version. They all get it right. Every one of them gets it right. Calvin, Tyndale, Cloverdale, Schmoverdale.
10:25?
Yeah. 10, right. 3 and 4.
Okay, gotcha. 3 and 4. Let me get from the first that comes.
This is one of those rare cases that everybody got it right. Except the rabbis on purpose.
Okay. Hebrews 10, 3 and 4. From the New International Version. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins. It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. That's all it says.
Keep going.
All right. Okay. Let me just get the whole chapter first. Let me see. Okay. Okay, 5. Therefore, when it says Christ, but Messiah came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. with burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased.
Stop. Read that again.
Um, Therefore, when Messiah came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me.
That's
With
Hebrews
burnt
10:5.
offerings. Yep,
So
10:5.
the Hebrews 10:5 in all translations, does it better match the doctored Masoretic or the Septuagint?
The Septuagint.
So if we throw out everything Greek just because it's Greek, now we have the rabbis making the New Testament look like it was created in a kindergarten by a nursery school student as a lie, as a fiction, as a cartoon. Because in Psalm 40 in the Masoretic version, there's no body. There's some dude who's leaning left with his ears to learn Torah, right?
Yep.
In the New Testament, there's nobody leaning with their ears to learn Torah. There's somebody who's coming in a body to die for Israel. So that's the problem with being an extremist. Let's de-Greek everything. We can de-Greek the New Testament. We we cannot, and this is what I want to focus on before we get to Mordechai's point. We can and should de-Greek the New Testament. We cannot de-Greek the Tanakh because there are many instances where the Greek is more reliable than the anti-Yahusha parts of the Masoretic that were doctored. So when you hear someone, an extremist, get on YouTube, and there are plenty, believe me, I can send you the link after the service. I mean, after the podcast, where he's like, everything Greek has got to go. Well, if it's got to go, then you're basically relying on the rabbinic redactions that removed any hint of Yahusha, disconnecting the New Testament, making it look like a work of fiction rather than a work of historicity. Mordechai, go right
Yeah, I
ahead.
want to say to those that are not as well versed and are learning about the Restoration of Scriptures True Name Edition, I wanted to say that in the Restoration of Scriptures True Name Edition, in the beginning, it has an introduction and it has a lot of this information about the sources where the Restoration of Scriptures come from, and also has a lot of notes and a lot of teachings interpreting the verses at the end, and the Hebrew words also. So, when you purchase the Restoration of Scriptures, you're not going to just be reading the scriptures. There is an explanation where and why. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, let me give you a perfect example. So let me reiterate, and then I'll give you an example. Yoshi gave you one; he can give you 20. So I'm not going to say get rid of the Greek. I'm not going to say get rid of the Hebrew. I'm not going to say get rid of the Aramaic. I'm going to say we are at the point in Bavel. We are the children of Bavel. The world is still confused in their languages. Okay. We have to work with what we have. If we throw out the baby, we're in trouble. If we throw out the water, we're in trouble. If we close the bathtub, we're in trouble. If we lock the door to the bathroom, we're in trouble. Anything that doesn't give us added insight as if we were not in the age of Bavel, we're making a big mistake. And most of the translators and most of the translations that most of you are still using, something's been locked. To favor the Greek, they lock out the Hebrew. To favor the Aramaic, they lock out the Greek. So if you're an Aramaic primacist, more than likely you're going to lock out the Greek. We don't lock out anything except the devil, right? We want to know, because we're in the age of Bavel, right? Like Yoshi was saying a couple of weeks ago, we're in Bible times. Well, guess what? Bible times was the times of Bavel, Babylon, because after the Tower of Babel, after the Migdal Bavel, in Hebrew, Migdal Bavel, there was a confusion of language. When Yahusha was on the earth, were the languages confused? When
Yep.
Yahusha was walking this earth, were the languages confused? So didn't he also have this translation issue? Do you think Yahusha did not have a problem with the translations of his day? Didn't he say to the Pharisees in Matthew 15, you change the word of Yahuwah and make the word of Yahuwah of none effect? They changed a korban for Yahuwah and they gave it to their parents in their old age to keep the money in the family. He says you've changed the word to favor your traditions. What makes you think that in the days of Yahusha and the apostles, they didn't have the same problem with translations that we have today?
I have a question.
Sure.
It says here that one of the resources for the restoration of scriptures through an edition, and I believe this is the way it is pronounced, is Quator Dekim. Can you share a little bit on the Quator Dekim?
Which one?
It
The
says
XIV.
Quator Decim. It says of the translation of the 14,
Oh,
included Ezra, Nehemiah.
okay. So basically, and we get this from Ezra and Nehemiah. Basically, and I have a book on that called The Ezra Monopoly. Mordechai, I would suggest you get it. Basically, Ezra had a monopoly on Hebrew because when the people came back from Babylon, they were speaking Chaldean and Syriac, and they didn't understand Hebrew. So when they read the Torah, the people were crying and crying, and we don't understand. We don't. How can we obey if we don't understand? So Ezra said, "I'll take care of it." He gathered a group of 14 translators, including himself, and they translated the Hebrew scriptures into Aramaic block letters. These Aramaic block letters became what's known today as modern Hebrew, the Babylonian block letters. So he took the Paleo Hebrew, he translated it into Aramaic block letters so that people can understand because they understood Aramaic block letters. In the process, we lost the last Paleo Hebrew manuscripts that Ezra used, and Ezra changed things because he hated the Samaritans and he hated the people who wanted to join in the rebuilding of the temple in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the temple and the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt. So when the 10 tribes from the north showed up and say, we've repented, we've stopped being pagans, we want to accept the word of Yahuwah, and we want to work with you to rebuild Jerusalem, Ezra said, go to hell and send them home. And he stopped the reunification of the two houses. So basically today, all the Masoretic texts come from the XIV, or the 14 translators that Ezra assembled. And we don't know what he did. We know he made changes. For instance, in the Torah, when he took the altar of Yahuwah and moved it from Mount Gerizim to Mount Ebal, because Mount Ebal is the mountain of cursing, and Ebal. Yahuwah put his altar on the mountain of blessing. Obviously, Yahuwah is a blessing. But Ezra, in order to make the Samaritans look like heathens and stop the two-house restoration, what Ezra did is he changed the Torah by moving Yahuwah's altar from Gerizim, where the blessings were pronounced, to where the cursings were pronounced on Ebal, so that the Samaritans would not look good, because they claim Mount Gerizim is where Yahuwah's altar is. The Jews say, no, it's in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. So in order to invalidate their claims, he changed the Torah. And so there were many places where he did that to stop the two houses from reuniting in his day. We call that the Quarantissimum or the XIV translators. The Masoretic texts today are the direct descendants of the school of Ezra. The ones that are doing the Masoretes, the Pharisees, were the previous school of Ezra, which is why we need the Septuagint. Okay? Because maybe they were working from a Paleo Hebrew that Ezra didn't have. One thing is for sure, Ezra had a Paleo Hebrew. And one thing else is for sure, by the time he was done, we have the letters we have today. Paleo disappeared. Crazy stuff, guys. So let me show you what I said. So to recap, the exactly opposite of what the church translators did. They should have used the Greek for the Old Testament, not the New Testament. They did the opposite. They used the rabbinic doctored Hebrew for the Old Testament, supposedly, even though they couldn't read it too good, and then refused the Aramaic and stuck to the Greek in the New Testament, where they shouldn't have stuck to it. You see what these guys did? When Yahuwah says Bavel, and Yoshi was hitting upon that a couple of episodes ago, he said we're still in biblical times, right?
Right.
But didn't biblical times happen after the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11?
Precisely.
So we're still in that. We still have the problem that Yahusha had with all these translations. You think Yahusha didn't have problems with all these translations, but he was able to do what the RSTNE is doing. Sometimes Yahusha used the Septuagint. Sometimes Yahusha used the oldest Hebrew manuscripts that he had. They weren't called Masoretic. They probably the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of those type. Yahusha used what he had at his disposal to prove that he was the Mashiach. If Yahusha used all the tools at his disposal, don't we need to do the same thing today and not be radicalized into one language only? Right?
Right.
Let me give you a perfect example. And just to show you, we do need to de-Greek, but not in the Old Testament. I would say we need to de-Greek in the New Testament. I'm gonna look for something that's gonna blow your mind. And this is just a sample. Revelation, let's go to Revelation 9:11, the way it reads in the Greek. And actually, and this is what I'm talking about, okay? The RSTNE had the same rendering up until 2 weeks ago. But because we're hungering and because we're thirsting, we will listen to scholars that have done the work before us. We're not going to be so proudful and arrogant that say we're the scholars, right?
Yep.
There are people who did scholarship that you and I have not done, right?
Right.
They should take advantage of our research just like we should take advantage of their research. So look, this is the Greek, and this is a perfect example. So again, our approach as of today, maybe it'll change in 3 weeks. We want to de-Greek the New Testament, but be careful not to de-Greek the Old Testament, because if we do, we're going to create a disconnect between the covenants that will make the New Testament look like a nursery school fiction book. And it's not fiction, it's reality. It's heaven and hell. It's life and death. Okay? So it's on your screen. Let me make sure it's here. I always forget to put it up.
Yep. So.
Okay?
Yep.
So this is the way the RSTNE read as of a week ago. Now tell me if there's a problem here. Mordecai is going to be able to hit on this real easy. They have over them a king, the angel, Angelon, of the abyss. The name of the angel in Hebrew is Abaddon. And in the Greek, Helleniki, in the Greek, well, first of all, who cares about the Greek? Why doesn't it say in the French? Why doesn't it say in Italian? Why doesn't it say in Portuguese? This shows you that those guys, Tyndale, Schmindale, Windale, Cloverdale, they all had a Greek agenda, anti-Torah, anti-Hebraic agenda. They say in the Hebrew it's Abaddon, but in the Greek, who asked you? You think Yahuwah is going to tell you what the name of the angel who is guarding the abyss? You think Yahuwah talks like that? Oh, by the way, in case you were wondering, in the Greek, no. Who put that in? We know who put that in. Watch. In the Greek, the name is Apollyon. Now, here's your problem. Yahuwah is allegedly saying, okay, in Hebrew, the angel of the bottomless pit that guards the bottomless pit is Abaddon. But in Greek, well, Yahweh's not going to tell you, but in Greek, or why not in Chinese? Who put that in? The people with the agenda put that in, and they
Yep.
show you what their agenda. Now, watch this. And the name of Yahuwah's angel who is guarding the bottomless pit so nobody can get in or out without his permission is named Apollos. Apollos. Yahuwah has an angel named Apollos.
Yep.
Let's go back to the earlier part. They can't get out. They have tails like scorpions, and their power to injure for 5 months. But they're not getting out because they're in prison. But they have a messenger over them. He is the angel. That doesn't mean he's a demon. He is a guardian and of the abyss. No one gets out without Yahuwah's permission. Okay, and then when Yahuwah unleashes these demons, of course, the great tribulation occurs, etc., etc. So are we to believe that there's a messenger, whether it's clean, unclean? I believe it's a clean messenger. Are we to believe that there's an angel named Apollos? Apollos is a Greek god. So we have to de-Greek this. Now, let's see how this reads in the Peshitta. And don't take my word for it. We're going to stay right here on Bible Hub, sweetheart. That's what we're going to do. You guys see it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still on Bible Hub?
Yep.
Watch this now. Okay, people think, oh, Sholiach is making up words. Okay, let's see if I'm making up words. This is from the Peshitta. You see that?
Yep.
Revelation, and those guys, Tyndale and Cloverdale and Wycliffe, they had this available, guys. They had this available. They chose not to use it because they were radically Latinized and they were radically Grecicized, and they were blind to what was available. It's true. They didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's true. But they were willingly blind to what they did have. Okay? Now, let's go to verse 11. Now, listen very carefully and tell me if you see a difference. Oh. And there is a king over them, the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Avadu, and in Aramaic is Aramit in Hebrew. And Aramit, his name is Shara. Shara means a prince. He is the prince who guards the demons from escaping until Yahuwah says, go. The second woe, one woe is past. The second woe is here. And go do your destruction. Go do your thing. Look at that. So instead of Apollos, Shara. Now, if you look up in the Hebrew, it's Shin Resh Yud. What does that word sound like? Sar. What is the Hebrew word sar?
Prince.
Prince. He's the prince over the abyss. So do you think Yahuwah is going to call him a sar, or is he going to call him Apollos?
What these guys were doing is basically saying, okay, this dude that you call the guardian of the abyss, he's our Apollos. It's like they're trying to explain the cognate of pantheons.
Is this crazy or what, man? This is crazy stuff.
This is demonic. That's what it is.
So in the perfect King James Bible, which comes from the perfect Tyndale Bible, okay, which comes from the perfect Wycliffe Bible. None of them wanted to use the Aramaic. They had it. They had this right here. They chose Apollos instead of Sarai. Sar means Sarah. What was Abraham's wife? Sarah. Same word.
And that affects the Portuguese too, because we were discussing earlier about the João Ferreira de Almeida version. That is, I'm as I said, I was not a Christian before, so I don't know all the versions here. But this seems to be the most famous and most reliable, as they say. Basically, a guy named João Ferreira de Almeida did only the New Testament translation in a year. And he basically used, and that it was before the internet times. I'm doing the Avia scriptures in a year. I'm not even in half of the Tanakh. So for him to do in 1 year in the medieval times, it was basically copying and pasting. He didn't change a bit. So, and pretty much what he used was a Latin version from a guy called Theodore of Beza. That this Theodore of Beza was a French dude that was a Protestant involved in the Protestant Revolution. So we are basically walking in the same pathway of Martin Luther. We are basically walking in the same pathway as William Wycliffe. So nothing was changed. He basically used translations from the Spanish, French, and Italian, and he
Catholic.
checked, yeah, Catholic things, and
Under
he
the guise of
basically,
Protestantism. Under the
yeah,
guise of Protestantism.
and he would look at some sources in other European languages. So no Hebrew, no Aramaic, nothing about the original fonts, the original languages, the Semitic documents, nothing. So even in the Portuguese, and for those who didn't listen to the first episode, I'm not an American. I speak English, but I am Brazilian. So we used and relied on the Portuguese language. But even the Portuguese is defectuous. It's basically flawed
So
because the
basically,
sources are not the main the best ones.
so basically, all these languages went to the Roman Catholic beast, Mother Church, to find some finger or some milk bottle to suck at her teats, claiming to be different. Claiming if they were different, Mr. Ferrer would have gone right to the Aramaic I just read to you.
Yep.
It was available when Mr. Ferrer was around. You realize that? The Aramaic Peshitta has been around since the time of Moshe. These people are without excuse. And these are the scriptures that you're reading, friends. And I read for years and I never questioned. How can it be bad? I got saved reading this. I learned to love Yahusha reading this. That's true. But that's because the grace and the rachamim and the sure mercies of David, the royal house of David, broke through those barriers because he's more powerful than all those barriers. But that don't mean we shouldn't remove the cataracts when we find out we have cataracts in our eyes. Do we leave the cataracts there, or do we go to the doctor and remove the cataracts? Simple.
It is a choice.
Now, I'm going to share some. I don't know if you guys want to chip in here, because if not, I'm going to share something else with you. If that don't blow you away. So how do you feel about Apollos? Oh, that's what I wanted to say. And Mordecai, you can chip in on this because you're pretty good with this stuff. Now, if that's true with the Apollos business, okay, we see here that it's actually Sar, right? We saw that.
Yep.
But let's assume, let's go back to Apollos. Apollyon. It's on your screen?
Yep.
Okay. Let's assume this was the original. Now, isn't there a verse, Mordecai? And I've heard you talk about this before. Isn't there a verse in the Torah that says the following? It says, the name of other gods, what? Should never come from your lips. Yes?
Yep.
Oh, man.
Then Yahuwah turns around and says the name of other gods. He won't let us do it.
Wow.
He won't let us do it. We can't say Apollo, Venus. No, we can't do it. But he turns around, violates his own Torah, and pronounces the name of other God. It even says in the Torah, from your lips. It doesn't say don't do sermons. He doesn't say don't do studies. He doesn't say that. He said don't even let it cross your lips. You know what I'm talking about? You know the verse I'm talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of times when I witness to the Cuban friends and family, they are into voodoo, and I know all the names because I grew up in Cuba, and I never say the names. So this is me, just a human being, and because I know there's a commandment that Yahuwah said, yeah, not to let their names be heard out of your mouth. So yeah, you're right, 100%. Yahuwah is not gonna say those names.
Yep. Exodus 23:13.
Exodus 23:13.
Yep.
Can you read that? Read that, please.
Yep. I'm gonna read it in the first Bible that comes up. Ironically, the New King James. Do not invoke or summon the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips.
So then Yahuwah writes the book of Revelation, gives it to Enoch, who of course is the angel, the immortal angel, who says, I used to be one of your brothers. I used to be one of the prophets. And says, oh, the angel who guards the bottomless pit is Apollos. Oh, so Yahuwah is breaking Exodus 23:13. But you and I can't, but he can. This is what happens when you believe that the English translators did a good job. They did not do a good job. They had an agenda.
They just made error accessible. That's it.
Exactly. And then how did we get the other translations? They copy and pasted the errors. Now here we come and we look like radical people who are changing Yahuwah's word. How dare you? Don't you have the fear of Yahuwah? Don't you realize Yahuwah said if you add or take away from his word, you will have the plagues? Yes, we're not adding or taking away. We're taking 2 or 3 translations, putting them together and saying, may Yahuwah give you the full picture so that your understanding is not limited to the Jesuits, so that your understanding is not limited to Rome, so that your understanding is not limited to the murderer, Martin Luther, who murdered Jews, responsible for murdering not quite as many as Hitler, but enough. You can call them Khazars or whatever you want to call them. You still shall not kill, okay? We don't need that. We have the Aramaic. We have the Masoretic, which is a million times better than some of the Greek translations, even though the Masoretic has its own issues. So what do we do? Well, what did Yahusha do? He used them all. When Yahusha was on earth, I am convinced he used whatever he could to get his point across. Are we trying to get our point across? Or are we trying to be Greek primacists? Are we trying to get our point across? Or are we trying to be Aramaic primacists? What is our mission? To bring Israel back so that Israel would make teshuvah. If that's our vision, then we need to, like Brother Malcolm said, by any means necessary. Love, a little push, a little shove, a little kick in the ass, whatever it takes to get black folks the right to vote. By any means necessary. We're not changing anything. Changing means the Quran. You make it look like the Quran. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Yes,
Also,
go ahead. Yeah, that's fine, Mordechai. Do what you got to do.
one point that I wanted to make from the other episode is that we were talking about the Catholics having all the resources available and choosing not to use them. By studying the history of the Crusades, for like the Catholic Church did a lot of bad things, but studying just the Crusades alone, they didn't want to use the resources. They wanted to control the people, to make them think that, okay, yeah, we are the only right source you guys have. Otherwise, we have a big ass sword to prove you wrong. So
Yeah.
you better not try to research that much. You can fulfill your curiosity if you want to, but don't go overboard thinking that you can study Hebrew or what else. We don't care. Just do what
Right.
we are telling you to do. Otherwise, you're going to be burned, and it's not going to be nice.
And they themselves were not willing to study the Hebrew. They
Precisely.
themselves were not willing to investigate the Aramaic New Testament. So their sins were double. The translators' sins were double. On one hand, we're not going to delve into the most reliable manuscripts, but on the other hand, we're not going to let you do it either because you are not qualified. So that they muzzled themselves in order to muzzle the people.
Because
So
the goal was
they-
never to bring the point across. The goal was basically to say, these scriptures that we are offering to you, they engrand our position. That's all that matters. Now you go and plow the field that I'm paying you to do, and don't bother reading the hard things. We do it for you. How convenient.
So the translations that you guys have are all agenda based. If you don't have the RSTNE, it's agenda based. You say, well, wait a second. That's not the only Hebraic true name translation. It is the only one that uses all the resources available, because the scriptures from South Africa is basically the Masoretic text and the Greek New Testament. No different. The Aramaic Peshitta is the Aramaic Peshitta, but they have 5 missing books. Do we just ignore those 5 missing books? The RSTNE is not, like you were saying, Yosh, the RSTNE does not have an agenda. Here's our agenda: to bring the intention of the Father and eliminate the filter of Bavel, the confusion of languages back to an understanding, not to Hebrew, not to Aramaic, like Brother Malcolm said, by any means necessary. White folks thought that he was saying murder us. If you got to murder the white man, do it. No, that's not what he was saying. He was saying if you have to use a ship, if you have to use a plane, if you have to use a horse, as long as we get where we need to get.
Um, to what Yoshi was saying, don't go too far. Even today, this day, I have a friend. She's from Philippines, and I ask her, "Well, don't you read the Bible?" And she says, "We cannot read the Bible. You cannot understand the Bible. Only the priest can read the Bible and explain it to us what it says." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, and Wycliffe was a priest, right?
Yep.
Tyndale was a priest. The Baptists and the Southern Baptists and the Calvary Chapel, they made these people into heroes. These are the fathers of the English Bible. What they don't tell you is they never renounced the Vatican. The Vatican renounced them for going from Latin to English. See, they were renounced for betraying Latin. But they never renounced Mama Beastie and her teats. They never renounced it. So, but in the Protestant movement, they're heroes. You and me are heretics. Why? Because we're taking the Aramaic Peshitta that was around from the days of the apostles, and we're actually pulling it off the shelf and saying, maybe Sarai is a more accurate translation than Apollos. But here's the danger. If you de-Greek the Septuagint, you're stepping on your own foot. See?
Yep.
There has to be balance here. There has to be balance.
Well, the Septuagint Greek is different Greek because the Septuagint, as I read, I don't know if I'm right, it was approved by the Sanhedrin. And now you have the Masoretic text. The Sanhedrin did not even exist when it came out. So,
Excellent.
so how can anybody come against the Septuagint when it was approved by the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem?
That's an excellent point. The Greek stuff with the 5,800 manuscripts, who knows which one came from where? Maybe one came from the Philippines. Maybe the one came from Tartaros. Who the heck knows? Who the heaven knows? But when it comes to the Septuagint, exactly what you said. There were 70 translators, not one, not two, 70 commissioned by the Sanhedrin, whether you believe in the Sanhedrin or not. The point was they were Hebrew speakers. So the way the Septuagint was translated is everybody was given a portion, and then they would switch portions and double check each other. So I would say that's a lot better than some Catholic getting a hold of the German of Martin Luther and translating it to Portuguese or translating it to Spanish. I would rather have 70 Hebrew scholars exchange notes. You have to understand. One translator was assigned Isaiah and Ezekiel, and the other was assigned Jeremiah. Then they switched, and they double checked the work. So what do you think is more reliable? The Apollos people, okay, in Revelation 9:11, or real Hebrew scholars?
Well, even the Sanhedrin of those days is not like the Jewish people of these days that they reject Sholiach. Because I know you did a study a while back about all the forefathers that interpreted Isaiah 53 as being the Moshiach. You got the Jewish people today, they say that Isaiah 53 is Israel. But you got, not to go too far away, 500 years ago, a lot of the Hebrew people, Jewish people that were in Spain. And a lot of those Spanish Jews, they interpret the Isaiah 53 as is the coming Moshiach. So it's a different mindset, the Sanhedrin, from what the Jewish people are telling you today.
And the fact that Paul and Yehusha and
Mhm.
others used the Septuagint, what does that tell us? That tells us it was reliable. Okay, when Yehusha quotes in Matthew 24, when Yehusha says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Ben Adam," or in Aramaic, the Bar Enosh, right? Right? Is he not saying there was a guy named Noah? It wasn't Veggie Tales or fairy tales. When he quotes Noah, isn't Yahusha saying there was a guy named Noah and there was a boat and there was a flood? When Yahusha says you greatly err not knowing the scriptures, he is not the Elohim of the dead but of the living. He is the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and all lived to him. Is he not telling you that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob actually lived, that they were real people? The fact that Yahusha would use the Septuagint says that the Greek was not a factor, exactly what you were saying, because he trusted the 70 scholars behind the Greek. He wasn't fixated on de-Greeking.
Mhm.
So again, to repeat for the 10 millionth time, because this is crucial, there's a lot of stuff out on the internet. We should de-Greek the Brit Chadashah. We cannot de-Greek the Old Testament any more than we can de-Hebrew the Old Testament.
Well, Luke, I think it's Luke 4:18. Yahuwah walks in the synagogue. He grabs a scroll and he reads out of Yeshayahu 61, Isaiah 61. Now, when he reads, that scroll says that he was reading. It says that he come to deliver the captive, give sight to the blind. But if you go to the same Isaiah 61 in the Masoretic text or in the King James, any Bible, it doesn't say what the Brit Hadashah says. It says that he came to free the captive. It doesn't mention give sight to the blind. So that's telling you there that Yahusha was reading a different scroll. Now, now you got
That's
the
right. That's
now
right.
you got the Jewish people today. They do not believe in Moshiach. They will use that to tell you that, well, look, in the Old Testament, which is older than the New Testament, this is what they say. It doesn't say give sight to the blind, so therefore you adding to this. But the truth is that the scroll they read that Yahusha was reading from is actually older than what they have because they're reading really from the I believe it's the Masoretic text they're
Yes.
reading from, and they did not want the people to come to Yahusha, so they took that out.
That's right.
Scripture says not to add and not to take anything out. So if they're going to accuse the restoration of scriptures of adding, which is not, and then go back and then read your look for and read your Isaiah 61 and compare. So who's taking out? Who's really taking out and adding stuff?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Now, but
Because
in Luke,
you have witnesses. You have
yeah,
witnesses of Luke 4 that that's what Isaiah 61 says, according also to the Dead Sea Scroll.
exactly. Exactly. And in Luke 4:18, like you were saying, we know that in the synagogues, um, only Hebrew was allowed to be read from the Bima. In other words, you can read the Septuagint in Greek, or you can read the Targumim, Onkelos and Jonathan. You can read the Targumim and you could read the Septuagint outside the synagogue. But when it came to the Torah service, it was done in Hebrew. So exactly what you're saying, which is brilliant. Now watch this. He was not using the Septuagint because you could not read in Greek from the Bima in the synagogue at the time of Yehusha. He was reading a Hebrew manuscript from which the Septuagint was taken.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
brilliant. You
Yep.
see
Yep.
that? You could not get up. You'd be thrown out of the synagogue. If
Yeah.
you got up and read in Latin, which didn't exist, oh, I guess it kind of existed. Pardon
Yeah.
me. If you read in any other language, you would literally be thrown out of the synagogue. So we know he was reading Hebrew, and like you said, the Hebrew that he was reading doesn't match the Masoretic, but it does match the Septuagint.
That's precisely the reason why the Masoretic came to be, because they needed to prove this guy wrong.
Do
In
we
a
have
way,
Isaiah 61 on the Dead Sea Scrolls? Yes, right?
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Dead Sea Scrolls match
Match.
the opening the eyes of the blind.
Man.
Because if you hadn't noticed, when Yahusha was practicing medicine, one of the things that he liked to do in his spare time was open the eyes of the blind. In other words, the hardest thing for modern medicine, other than cancer, but you can even argue that, where we're making advances in cancer, but no advances in blindness from birth. He was opening the eyes of the blind, which is exactly what the Hebrew from which the Septuagint was taken said the Messiah was due. So, like both of you were saying, that had to be removed. Because if there was someone who was opening the eyes of the blind from birth, he had to be Yahuwah in the
Had to
flesh.
be Yahuwah.
and that would
Nobody.
mean that
And they had to change the word. They had to remove the words.
and if that guy that proclaims to be Yahusha is actually doing miracles that nobody can explain, that necessarily means that we, as the leader of the Jewish people, we cannot listen to the Roman emperor anymore, and that would mean a gigantic warfare. And now we need to rely on this dude that out of a sudden says that we cannot, we need to be revolutionaries against the Roman Empire. So that's why the Masoretic, that one of the reasons why the Masoretic came about, because we need to prove this guy wrong. Otherwise, we're going to lose control over the people.
Correct. But if we throw the whole Masoretic in the garbage,
Then we don't have Tanakh.
now where do we start?
Yep.
What came first, Hebrew or Aramaic? Hebrew.
Hebrew.
What came first, Hebrew or Greek? Hebrew. So, and what does Jubilees tell us about the original language? Hebrew. All the animals spoke Hebrew.
Yep.
Even the animals spoke Hebrew. So we can't just. The problem with translations, I have found, is that they harbor the agenda of extremists. And if you're going to be a disciple of Yahusha, you need to be balanced. If you like a copy of the scripture that is balanced, then the RST is for you and you're for the RSTNE. And we need you, not just to promote it, to buy copies. Because when you buy copies, we can keep it free online. When you buy copies, we can reach the lost sheep of Israel. When you buy copies, you're reaching people that think that the King Jimmy is perfect, that they don't need revelation, that they don't need understanding. So, but now you know better, and when you buy those copies, you support the ministry. This is not a business; it's a ministry. But more importantly, you are bringing back the law. Yahusha said, "I have only come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel that have gone astray and that have gone whoring." These people have a problem with whoring, not keeping their pants on, but with Apollos, with Venus, and a part of their whoring is in their translations. Let me say that again. Part of the problem of Ephraim in their whoring is found in the very book that's supposed to take them out of whoring.
Yep.
Sholiach, in Isaiah 36:11, I'm looking for it. I don't know if this is in context, but it's saying, do not speak to us, speak to us in Aramaic, don't speak to us in Hebrew, for we don't understand it. I believe that's what it says. It's Isaiah 36, verse 11. Then Eliakim, Shebna, and Yoah said to the field commander, please speak to your servant in Aramaic since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people or of the wall. If this is in context, answer. If not, then bypass it. Because that scripture just came to my head.
No, that's good. Yeah, for sure. That shows you that Yahweh used Aramaic. and that also shows you that the people, what that Isaiah? So
Isaiah 36:11. I guess there was a time where some people didn't speak Hebrew.
yeah, but then no, that's right. But then that was Isaiah. That was about 700. So then 120 years later, Ezra knew that the people didn't understand Hebrew, so he took advantage of that and made his own translation. They spoke Aramaic, as you just confirmed.
Yep.
And 150 years later, Ezra said, "Hey, the people don't speak Hebrew, so I'm free to make my own translation." Meaning, I could move Yahweh's altar from Gerizim because we don't want to show people that Shomron is also a blessed place of worship. And so we can move the altar from Gerizim to Ebal. We could make other changes, like the place that Yahuwah shall choose in the future, as opposed to the place Yahuwah has already chosen. So yeah, the Ezra took a lot of liberty.
In the first exile in 721 BC, the Assyrian captors, they basically put a lot of settlers there, but they removed the noble people who knew the language and could pass it on, because not everybody was a scribe, not everybody was lectured and knew how to read and write. So with this capturing of the, let's say, the knowledgeable people when it came to language and linguistics, a lot of people lost the way of learning and also the way of passing it forward. So a lot of people lost the Hebrew language with the first diaspora, and also the Jewish people, when they were captured to Bavel, they also lost the Hebrew language. That's why Ezra had to take the Paleo Hebrew to translate it to the Imperial
Aramaic
Aramaic.
letters. Yep, that's right.
So even before this whole confusion in Isaiah's time, 700 years before Messiah, the language was already a problem, and the Hebrew was already starting to be lost.
That's a very very good point because one of the reasons among many that the Assyrians took away the noble ones, because the noble ones were the well learned people. Basically, they were the teachers. So if you take the teachers away who are teaching Hebrew and you teach them Syriac, and you get them away from the Hebrew tongue, who's left when they return? Who's left to teach the people? Nobody, because you already brainwashed the teachers with a new language or a sister language or a similar language. Exactly. What made them noble was not just that they had money; they were the scholars. They were the educated. So then, after a generation or two, the educated are not around anymore. So who's going to restore Hebrew to the teacher? Ezra said, "I'll do it." Okay, but I have an agenda. Ephraim came back, and I told him to go to hell. I says, "You cannot build this temple. You can. This is not your home. We are not your people. Go back to Mount Gerizim." They did, and they continued in their paganism. When they were willing to repent, they were willing to worship Yahuwah and give up their paganism. And Ezra told them, "Go to hell. You're not part of us." And Yahusha said, he came and he says, "Yes, they are part of you." And Ezra, you rejected them, but I'm here to bring them back, to make the two sticks echad. And that's another thing. The restoration scriptures has a big focus on restoration, two houses. The church doesn't care about the house of Israel, 10 tribes. The
Mm.
Jews don't care about the house of Israel, the 10 tribes. We have a translation that wants to restore things so that the 10 tribes feel welcome. They don't feel condemned when they come back. So it is a two house friendly scripture, for sure, for sure. Any
You
other
guys,
closing ideas? We are basically out of time. I'll let you guys have the final word, either one of you.
I just want to say, you're right. The for the most part, Yehuda is all about Yehuda. They don't really care about. They don't mention Ephraim. They don't mention Israel at all. It's all about Yehuda. I
Yeah.
just want to say thank you for inviting me again. This is
Well,
a pleasure.
you're a regular part of the broadcast.
Hey, thank
There's
you.
no, you're not an invited. You're a fixture.
Toda.
Invited is someone who's not a fixture.
this is good. I'm going to share this because there's a lot of people that need to hear this truth.
Oh yes, this podcast, man.
Lots of believers.
This podcast is going to be. I'm telling you, we don't have to kick doors open, guys. The Restoration Roundtable we are already on major platforms. We don't have to kick doors open. We are on all main. That's amazing, man.
Yeah,
That's
Sholiach.
amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, friends. All right. Until next week.
Shalom, yo.
Shalom, everybody. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to the RSTNE Roundtable podcast, a discussion that focuses in the gold standard of the Word of Yahuwah. Here are your three hosts, Sholiach Moshe, leader Yoshiyahu, and leader Mordecai.